Welcome to Real Learning with Real People, where we learn from authentic and remarkable people in order to enhance the lives of our listeners. I'm Ken King, and I truly appreciate you joining me to learn today. This show was created in order to learn from and connect with people who have great lessons and stories that will positively impact listeners from all walks of life. In these unscripted conversations, we dive into the upbringing of our guests in order to really gain an understanding of their framework for life and who they are. Then we walk alongside them as they show us how that framework has impacted them in what they do. This is intentional because when we understand that who we are and what we do are different, we can really start to see how they are connected to performance, learning, creativity, and inclusivity. Now let's jump in as we chase some real learning from some real people. My guest today is Craig Burgess from, well, just about everywhere these days. You could say he's from Unobvious or from GetDoingThings.com, maybe even the author from the book Press Start, or even just that English guy on Twitter a lot. But Craig is a graphic designer by trade, living life as a professional doer of things. He tries stuff, he messes up, and he's the furthest thing from a perfectionist, which is one of the reasons why we get along so well. Craig's branding himself in a beautifully imperfect way that is great education for young adults and teens to understand the real way that success and learning actually happen. In this episode, Craig and I talk about the skill vacuums that exist for some key attributes like curiosity and humanity. We also discuss how to bring value to the world and why Twitter is the premier networking and learning platform out there, in his opinion, and I happen to agree with him. Let's check out my chat with the impressive Englishman, Craig Burgess. Craig, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. I tweeted at you yesterday, I guess, telling you and the world by extension that I was excited to finally record with you because I feel like we get along really well and we've known each other for a really long time, but we met through social media. We've interacted through video chat and we live opposite the world from each other, and it still feels like we know each other pretty well. In my opinion, this will be the awkward moment where you're like, I disagree, but.
Who are you? Yeah, no, I agree. That's just the awesomeness of the internet now, isn't it? I think we first met on Instagram. You liked one of my visuals or something like that. We got chatting. We found each other on Twitter. We had a couple of calls. It's just lovely. I love that about the internet. And it wasn't until 2020 that I started doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the fact that we're going to talk about a lot of the work that you do and your visuals and stuff like that. But speaking of the internet, can you imagine what the last year would have been like without the capacity to connect like this?
Oh, it would have been so different because in the UK, we were locked down at points. We weren't allowed to leave our houses at all. In the first lockdown, we're on lockdown 3 now. In the first lockdown, we weren't even allowed to see anybody, even if you lived by yourself. So yeah, without the internet, Jesus, what would you have done? You wouldn't even been able to work, would you? You would have been literally sat at home watching daytime TV.
Yeah, and that much, speaking from experience, consumption of daytime TV, especially news, would have been detrimental to the mental health side.
Yeah.
So as usual on this show, I like to kick it off by getting a deeper understanding for you as the guest and your upbringing. What made you early on in life, your family history a little bit, and as much or as little as you're willing to share is awesome. And it's something that you and I haven't broached. I don't really know a lot about that part of you. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about the early days for Craig Burgess.
Oh, it's incredibly boring. So so right now I'm 32, about to turn 33. So I've lived 32 glorious years on this planet, and I had loving parents. They split up when I was 15. They got divorced. I went to live with my dad. That's kind of the normal history. And then what's I guess quite interesting about some of that is that I always wanted to be a cop. So from as early as I can remember, I always wanted to be in the police. Don't know why. I just did. And I wasn't encouraged by my parents because they've never forced me to do anything, but they've always supported me. So they always presumed I was going to be a cop. And I even did. Do you have work experience? What do you call work experience? At
Like
school.
practicum or placement kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was 15, and I had work experience. So it was 2 weeks away from school to learn how the real world works. And my dad actually managed to swindle me to go work with a firearms team in the police for 2 weeks, and it was the most amazing thing ever. I ran the courses for them, so actually moved the targets up and down with all the computers and everything like that, and I got to fire some guns. In the UK, that's not something we get to do very often. So, in fact, that's the only time I've ever fired guns. And then I got to work with a riot squad for a couple of days. Oh, it was amazing. So at 15, I was definitely going to be a cop by then. And then I got to 18 years old. I couldn't be a cop at 18. You have to be 18 and a half, 18.5 before you can be a cop in the UK. And I wasn't so bad at school. I got good grades. So I did another course. I did like a university course. And when I did the university course, I did a HND in interactive media, which was basically web design. And I got introduced to this world of graphic design. And as soon as I got introduced to it, that was it. I was obsessed with it. I've got quite an obsessive personality anyway, but I discovered this, and I've been a graphic designer since I was 18, and I'm 32 now. And that's it.
We're going to talk a lot about your graphic design side because the reason why, as you mentioned, that I reached out to you and began following you digitally in the first place was because I loved the cheekiness and the sometimes passive aggressiveness and some of the sarcasm and that kind of stuff that exists in your design. But I want to fill in a couple blanks of those early days for you. So first of all, I love the UK because it's the only time I ever hear anybody have to reach half ages in something.
Yeah.
Like just those extra 6 months really would have allowed you to be more prepared, I guess. Somebody
I know.
decided.
I know it's strange.
I imagine it being like, okay, so at 18.1 you can vote, at 18.2 you can you can open a business, 18.5 then you can be a cop once you've hit some of these random intervals.
But at 17, you're allowed to drive. And until 5 or 6 years ago, I think you could start smoking at 16. They change it to 18. So you hit 16, you can start smoking. You hit 17, you can start driving, but you've got to wait 1.5 years before you be a police officer.
Yeah, I don't know, but as the important thing is that you can start sucking cancer into your lungs really early on in life. That's as long as you get clearly all the government officials decided that should happen first.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I want to know a little bit just about. I ask the same question to every guest. If you had to describe each of your parents with a word, what would that be?
I think probably both of them. I'd say the same thing. Just supportive. I'm really lucky, and I've said this on so many podcasts. I'm really lucky that I've got parents that never forced me to do anything, that always encouraged my incessant questions when I was a kid. I was always that kind of kid. I was always curious. I was always that kind of kid that said, "Why are traffic lights red, orange, and green? And why is this that color?" And this, and they never used to say just because, Craig. They actually tried to help me find the answers out. And then when I decided to have this massive career shift at 18, they were never bothered. They never expected me to be a cop. They never expected me to do any of that stuff. And they didn't understand design. Most people still don't. They never expected anything of me. And that's allowed me to just be me. And I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I'm lucky to say that that's something that I have in my background as well, and I think that in my coaching, my college and university coaching and teaching, especially where you're dealing with the young adults, you see the difference in those early adult years between the people who had that support and that ability to be curious in their child and preteen years especially, and the
Mm.
ones who are young adults and they already don't have a capacity to try new things, to take risks, to make mistakes, to be curious. And it, as you're saying, it's just such a valuable skill that I think 20 years ago people probably wouldn't have described curiosity as a skill. They would have just said like everybody has it, or it was more common. And
Mm.
now we just have, there's a lot of deficit, I think, in the curiosity front.
I completely agree with you. Curiosity is lacking so badly. I know. So my girlfriend's got a sister, and she's around 20 years old, and she did a fine art degree at university, and she never knew what she wanted to do, and she came to work with me for a little bit and to see if she wanted to be a designer. She didn't know what she wanted to do with the skills that she had. And I just said to her, just try stuff. Just be curious and try stuff. You've got this amazing skill. You're a good artist. You can draw things. Imagine the places you can take that. I was asking her to I was asking her to make me like paintings with Batman in them, but sat in a countryside and all these kind of things. She never did it for me. But I used to suggest stuff to her like that, and I'm like, wow, I can't think of a time in my life where I haven't known what to do next. And it wasn't that I knew where I was going to end up. It was just that I knew just enough for a week ahead of me to say, oh, wouldn't it be cool to try this? And I did it, and that might have led somewhere else. And it's just so sad to see somebody like that. And she isn't alone. This is what a lot of people are like. It's so sad to see somebody like that who doesn't know what they want to do next with the skill they've already got. And the world is literally their oyster, and they don't know how to open the oyster.
Yeah, that's a really, really concrete way to look at it, I think. And I I wish that everybody who's listening to this who maybe hasn't seen your work yet had seen this before the conversation. And if they haven't, they should pause this and go check it right now, because especially on Twitter, which we'll talk about a fair bit here in a moment, because it's your platform of choice. Um, I just find I find it so refreshing anytime somebody's just like produce, 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 but in a creative, curious kind of way where stuff's just going out. And you say it all the time in tweets and on your show, but I see it too in your history. There's stuff in there that does not land at all, right? You've got some tweets that have gone borderline viral, or I don't know what viral is, but like some big things that people have really latched onto, and then some things that it's like not. And I love that, because like we've done that too, where the person who helps me with my marketing hates it, because it's like we have an online store where I've tried to play around with designing some clothing and shirts and stuff like that, because I love it even though I'm not good at it. You actually, one of your images is on there, though nobody's ever bought it, the half-ass image, which still gets
Yeah.
me to this day. And they're not that well designed, to be honest. I kind of bastardized your image a bit, but I think it's funny. And the store is wildly unpopular. But then
Yeah.
we have all these experiments in our business side, in our training side, in our tech world, as we go into that I've just taken that same attitude to, of just like, let's just try and produce and put it out there and see what happens. And it has landed, and we've gotten traction with it. And honestly, it's connecting with and following people like you that make me want to do that more, not just on social media, but in multiple facets.
Yeah. How can you ever find the good things if you're not willing to try the bad things. It's
Mm.
something I've thought about a lot. And when I first started taking Twitter seriously last year in 2020, I considered deleting all my old tweets. At the minute, I've got about 39,000 tweets or something. And the in vogue thing to do on Twitter is delete the bad tweets. But as I started to think about it a little bit more and think about all the history of the daily projects that I've got and doing things regularly and doing bad things and occasionally finding a good thing, I feel like it's important for me to show that even as somebody who somebody might look to as being successful, I still get it wrong regularly. And the wrong things are as important, if not more important, than the bad things. So regularly when I tweet something, it doesn't land, I'll just re-quote it, quote tweet it and say, well, that didn't really work out, did it? You can't take yourself too seriously on these kind of things because, people want you to be human, ultimately. I think some people forget that sometimes.
If there's one thing that's rivaling, in my opinion, the curiosity vacuum, it would probably be the humanity vacuum.
Yeah. The humanity vacuum and the obsession with ego as well. I think people, you see it on Twitter all the time. You see it on Instagram as well. You see somebody who has 20,000 followers and they're a minor celebrity in terms of Twitter. And suddenly all their tweets, every one of them is amazing. They delete the bad tweets. They don't seem to really reply to anybody anymore. And their account will continue to grow. Excuse me. Their account will continue to grow, but there isn't a human side to it anymore. And that's ultimately, Jesus, my voice is going, hold on. That's ultimately the thing that connects people to you. And I think we often forget the human element when we start to make a success of something and we start to think we hit the big time. And that's where the ego comes into it, right? You start to let your ego run away with you. And that is a very dangerous combination, that, to be both popular and egotistical.
Yeah. And I love the relationship between ego that you're describing, but I also love the fact that I think you're challenging that both in your actions, but you're kind of set apart from the norm quite a bit, because, and I've seen this in my own experience, where people assume that if I'm putting out content, like I had mentioned to you the other day, that we're kind of blitzing platforms right now. Like we got accounts flying all over the place, different types of content coming out, some of it terrible, some of it okay, some of it a little bit better than okay. And I have people in my life, and I'm sure people who don't know me personally, who think that the goal of that content is that fame or that status or like that kind of thing. Like, are you trying to get your account to a certain size, or are you trying to get famous? And have you ever experienced that, where people are labeling your content because of the volume or the passion and attention that you pay to it as something that you're trying to do with that as your end game?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. I've had probably the best thing that ever happened to me on Twitter was my friends unfollowing me and sending me messages saying, "Dude, I love you, but I can't follow you anymore because your content annoys the hell out of me." And
I've had that too.
yeah, and so I've had messages like that, and then I've had people that think you're just in it for the fame or whatever. But the thing I realized in 2020 was, particularly as a designer. So a designer is a very common career, and it's very hard to stand out in a career that everybody assumes is commoditized, and it is really. It's commoditized. There's millions of websites where you can just download images, and that's really all I do. I'm an image maker. So I had to work out a way to set myself aside. And this is really what I try to do. It isn't about the fame. This is what I'm doing with it. it's a way to show my thinking, and that my thinking is different to everybody else's. And the only way I can do that is by turning up online every day, showing that my thinking is different, that I'm different, that my personality is a little bit different. And that's not to say that I'm purposefully trying to be different. It's just that I'm being myself, which is in and of itself quite different. And some people do assume that you're doing it for the fame or whatever that is. But I'm lucky that I don't have to make any money from the things that I do online. I'm a designer by trade. I run a design agency. So the stuff is for fun for me. But I think the attitude should be the same, whether it is your main income or not, that it's fun. Otherwise, really, what the hell is the point? Why are you spending so much time doing this stuff? People understand the fun as well. People see the fun. So yeah, there is that duality of people thinking that you want to be famous. I get ribbed all the time at work. People, you're an internet celebrity now and things like that. And I've only got 3,000 followers on Twitter. I'm hardly an internet celebrity. But there is that thinking. And I think it's a difference in attitude, really. I see it as everybody should be building a personal brand online now, because it's the only way you differentiate yourself in a crowded marketplace. A CV isn't enough. A resume isn't enough. You need a daily portfolio that you're updating to show your personality, your skills, etc. And then there's the other side of it that think they can still get away with being skilled at their job and think that's enough. It isn't for most careers.
Yeah, we've been working a little bit with employment services at a local college, and that is becoming such a big piece. It's not an option anymore to just like, oh, do you want a LinkedIn? Like, no, what is your LinkedIn? Do you have one? Because you should. Like, those are conversations that are happening. I love what you said about the showing up or turning up every day in the context of ego, because in the context of any other passion or job, that's the norm, right? Like, if you're a psychiatrist and you don't physically and emotionally and mentally, spiritually show up every day, you're not very good at your job. If you're a police officer and you're not there and present and focused and mindful every day, then you're not very good at your job. And if you show up every day intentfully focused, mindful, present, that kind of thing on social media, the assumption is you're doing it for some kind of external reward, when really in almost every other setting, if you turn up every day, nobody's judging you, assuming that you're trying to do that for some kind of fame or notoriety.
Yeah, it's the one thing I realized a long time ago, but it only really coalesced in my brain last year, was this idea of personal brand. And in every career, in every skill that you have or you do, be you a psychiatrist or a fitness guy or whatever, there's these people that sit at the top of the industry, isn't there? There's these people who you might follow on Instagram because they produce content, or there's these people you follow on Twitter, or you might subscribe to their email newsletter. And I used to think about this a lot when I first started my career as a designer. And I used to think, what makes them different? Why are they the experts? And then when I became an experienced designer and I had maybe 10 years experience, you look at these people a little bit bitterly and think, why are they still the experts when I'm a better designer than them? Why are they the ones at the conferences? And it wasn't until last year that I really realized what it was. And it was this turning up every day, but it's this turning up every day in public and professing your thoughts in public. This idea of expert is very strange. Purely the only way you become an expert is by throwing your opinions out in public every day. and throwing your experience out openly and honestly and freely. There isn't like an experts club somewhere that you need to be a part of to get these conference gigs and to get these podcast gigs. It's purely just turning up and being out there. But that little bit there, that being out there, that's scary. It's scary for a lot of people to actually say, I'm going to talk about my work in public against all the other odds, thinking about what are other people going to say about me? Are they going to be negative? It is tough.
Yeah, and in the term expert, and we talked about this earlier before coming on, that it's just so it's misused, it's misunderstood, it's probably one of the more wasted words in the English language. And I always think to science, the medical profession, research, anything like that, because there are so many examples in science throughout history, medicine, what have you, of men and women who were kooks, totally like disenfranchised, ignored by everybody, but they keep showing up every day. They keep doing their thing. They fail. A friend of mine, Trevor Reagan, who runs a learner lab, he and Train Ugly was actually how he started. He has this concept, learn like a scientist, because it's literally just show up, fail, don't get emotional about that failure, learn from it, kind of break it down, deconstruct it, and then show up again and show up again. And I love that because it's been proven time and time again that these people that we at some point totally discounted, maybe to the point where they're losing jobs, they're being ostracized, that kind of thing, especially in early humanities history. And then all of a sudden they are experts, or they are the gold standard, or their work has hit that level. And it's because of all of that preamble, that all of that constant showing up and failure, and in spite of all of that disenfranchisement and that kind of thing that they endured, that they're able to be now considered an expert. And I agree with you that 100% that in these days that involves you're showing up, being public and consistent, not just consistent behind closed doors. There's definitely still the idea and valid, or a high level of validity to showing up when no one's looking, and that's always going to be the case. But now there's a whole other layer to it, and people will leapfrog you if you only show up when no one's looking, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I always think back to the whole failing thing. I always remember the idea of it, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Somebody pops up out of nowhere and they're 40 years old and they're suddenly on every TV show and they've got a book out and they're all over YouTube. And you never stop and think for a second, hang about, they're 40 years old. What happened in the previous 39 years? They weren't born at 40 years old. They've likely been doing things wrong, or they've been doing things in private for 39 years. And then the 40th year, it suddenly hits. And you're so right. It's the scientist thing's a perfect way to put it. It's turning up every day and failing, really. Maybe little failures. We're not talking about massive failures, because I do think massive failures can set you back, but little mini controlled failures, let's call them experiments rather than failures, you need those every day or regularly to go, oh, well, that didn't work. What can I change to make it work? Otherwise, you end up working in private and not getting the feedback. And then in this day and age, what that really means is you start to atrophy instead of grow.
Mm. Yeah, and I love that it's almost like you scripted this conversation. And to everybody listening, I swear they didn't, but I wanted to touch on the idea, that physical fitness aspect, and you just said atrophy, and I often compare learning and growth to muscle building and growth,
Yeah.
and in the past year had a pretty public kind of fitness commitment. Did you? Where I can't remember what the challenge was called. What was that?
75 hard.
Yeah, and what can you describe that a little bit just for everybody listening?
75 hard is a program that lasts for 75 days, and you have to do a couple of things every single day. So every single day you have to do 2 45-minute workouts. One of them has to be outside. You have to drink 4 gallons of water. You have to stick to a healthy diet of your choice. Read 10 pages of a book every day. And there might be one other thing, but that's essentially the group of routines that you're doing for every day. And by the way, I have to say, I didn't complete 75 days. So I've got to preface it by saying that.
Well, and honestly, for me, there's a lot of science and reasons why all those different things are incorporated in it, and that was what drew me to it in the first place. And by drew me to it, I mean researching it, but not actually doing it. But you did it and took it on publicly, like
Yeah.
you did that publicly. What made you take that on, or what made you make that information public that you were taking that challenge on?
It's because it's the only thing I know. The only thing I know after 15 years of being a designer is being public and doing something every day. So everything I've ever learned, right back to the first year of me being a designer, I did an A4 poster, designed an A4 poster every single day for 365 days. That was the first daily challenge that I ever did. I became so enamored by it that 2 days after that one, I started another daily challenge for 365 days. And I think that was to design a record sleeve. And then after that, I took a photo every day for 365 days. And then some years later, I recorded a podcast every day for 365 days. You see the pattern. So I've long been obsessed with daily challenges because it's, for me, has proven to be an immensely accurate way of making progress, an immensely rewarding way, and actually an easy way of making progress. It sounds like a huge commitment, but it's actually easy because it's always on your mind and you can't escape it. It's not like exercising 3 times a week. You are there every day. And it teaches you so many other things too. So when I saw the 75 hard thing, I thought, this is it. This is my thing. I do daily challenges. So for me to be public with it, like I'd done for everything else I'd ever done, it was just natural to me. And I've always done that with the daily challenges. One, because it helps you to be public, but in some kind of way, I hope, and a lot of people did get in touch with me about the 75 hard. I hope that it inspires somebody else to get back into something, just a little bit. And that's kind of why I'm so public with a lot of things. There's not many things I hide, to be honest. I'm very public facing. So I felt like I had to, because of the way that 75 hard is. I had to be public with it.
Yeah, and even just the nature of saying like, "Oh, I didn't finish." that that there's I don't know how many people would even say that, especially in the way that I initiated the conversation. A lot of people just kind of let it roll out and not say that they did finish it. Not too many people would outright lie, but not too many people would stand up and say, "Yeah, I didn't even finish that." and that's important. There's value in that.
Yeah, well, I did it 3 times. I tried to do it 3 times. And it wasn't even that impressive. I only got to day 15. I got to day 15, then I was calculating my water wrong, right? So actually, I failed on day 15 just by calculating my water wrong. I thought I drank 4 gallons and I hadn't. And this is the point of 75 hard. It is extremely strict and you are meant to do everything to the letter. So I was doing everything to the letter for 15 days and I messed up. And then I started again and I think I got to day 10 or something. And then the reason I stopped was this. I thought, why am I punishing myself with such a strict thing? I already ate healthy. I already exercised regularly. I was already fit and strong. I already lift weights. I already do jiu-jitsu. But I was doing this extra thing. And individually already did all the things that was part of it. I already drank a lot of water. I already read books regularly. They, it felt like there was no value for it for me, and it was making me miserable. So I just looked at it and thought, there's no point in this. I could do it. I have done it lots and lots of times. I ran a mile a day for 365 days. I have done these ridiculous challenges. I did a jiu-jitsu tournament, and the day before the jiu-jitsu tournament, I ran 20 miles in an obstacle course race, and then turned up and did the jiu-jitsu thing the day after. So I didn't lack the discipline, and I don't lack it. So there was no point for me to carry on. There was no reason. So I thought, I'm going to stop. It wasn't serving me. And I think when I first did get into fitness, when I first started getting healthy, you do get carried away with that a little bit. You get caught up in some of these things. And you don't have to be so hard on yourself with some of these things. And I felt that 75 hard was just too extreme for me. 75 hard is fantastic if you are lacking discipline, if you want to get back into fitness, if you just feel like you're stuck in a rut or something like that. But the truth is I wasn't any of those, so I stopped. And that was it.
And that kind of closes the loop on the idea and the value of the skill of self-awareness, I think, where if you know who you are and are pretty actualized in the feeling of who you are and what your values are, then you can make clear and concise big and small decisions and show up without ego publicly and privately. And
Mm.
so if I were to ask you what the word value means to you, what would you say?
In what sense is what I'd first say.
Just so not in the sense of personal values, but more in the sense of adding or subtracting value to a group or the world or anything like that. Bringing value, I guess, would be the phrase.
Okay. Yeah. I I'm a big proponent of value in terms of providing it, in terms of producing content. So be that on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever your choice is. So value for me means that. And then, well, what does value mean in terms of creating content, and where does that sit? For me, in my profession, I'm a designer. For me, that means sharing actual knowledge that I've spent 15 years cataloging and creating, and sharing it freely online with no expectations. That's what value means to me. And there's lots of people who have made huge careers out of taking that attitude. And I don't think I know better. I don't know better than anybody else to discount that. So in terms of value for me, that generally means what the way I look at it. And another way to look at it is the way that I'm quite open and honest and freely giving with my time on certain things. So with the unobvious visuals, I'm a designer and I get paid well for being a designer. I've got 15 years experience, but I make the visuals for free. They make me no money. And if somebody like you, and you've come to me a few times, if you've got a quotation or something like that, I'll design you something for free in that setting. And that's another part of value for me. Giving freely. I think to simplify it, it's giving freely up front with no expectations, not just to get a reciprocation out of somebody.
I really like that. That that lack of transactionality, I think, really sets apart your version of that answer from others that I've heard in the past. And not that there's a better or worse. It's not that black and white, but that capacity to show up without needing something in return, or seeking something in return changes your perspective and makes it unique. And as we come to the idea of Twitter and what Twitter is and why you use that as kind of your primary arena right now, what is what is the value that you see Twitter bringing as a platform that sets it apart?
Twitter is the only place in the world where you can find fantastic thinkers, millionaires, billionaires, not that the money matters, famous people, scientists, a whole mix of everybody. You can find any of them and download their concise thoughts straight into your brain. All you have to do is follow them on Twitter. And in fact, you don't even have to follow them. You just have to go to their Twitter account. So that's really what makes Twitter different to anywhere else. The other thing is that it's really fast paced. So because it's fast paced, not only are you getting ideas, thoughts, just anything, just the latest things from people who know better than you in lots and lots of fields. That's what makes Twitter really special. You are getting the latest knowledge from experts in their field or just people that you want to follow. I think that's really what sets Twitter apart. There's nothing else like that.
Yeah, and I love it for a lot of the reasons. That direct connection that you're talking about, that quick download of ideas, it's incomparable in my mind. I agree with you, and to the point where, like, I was no fan of the most recent ex-president of the United States. However, I followed him on Twitter
Yeah.
until it became clear that he wasn't always tweeting. Because once it wasn't actually his thoughts anymore, I can't remember. He tweeted from the account mid live event, like a tweet went out mid live event. And it became clear that it was a publicist or whatever,
Yeah.
or scheduled. It doesn't really matter to me, um, but it was in relate, like it was sent inauthentically, as if it was being said about what he was doing at the time, and that was it for me. It was early, thankfully. It was early on in the presidency, so I dodged a lot of the dodged a lot of the stuff that came later. But it was just something that I was like, if I'm not getting it straight from you in an authentic way, I'm uninterested. Conversely, I have a good friend actually who's an example of this, and he's probably got about 30 followers on Twitter. His name's actually also Ken. Um, and he's a basketball coach who I coached with early in my basketball coaching career, and he tweets the funniest shit. Like, it's the stuff that he tweets. It's usually later in the evening, maybe very late in the evening. It's almost always current event based, and I always have time for that guy's tweets. I bet you over 50% of his tweets I've liked, and I've retweeted a good amount of them as well. And it's not just because I know him personally, it's actually because I never can see him anymore. We live on opposite sides of the country, and I'm getting that authentic experience from someone all the time.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. That's a powerful tool.
It is. It's also powerful on the flip side, in so much the fact that you can go to my Twitter account right now, and anybody else listening can, and immediately see the way I want you to see me. You can see the things that I'm saying. You can see the way that I say them. You can see the things that are important to me. It is literally this idea of a daily portfolio. And next week, I might care about something else, and then you can see it again.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what makes Twitter powerful. But there's also the other side of it, is the friend building and the networking. And even on LinkedIn, I'm not a fan of LinkedIn. I've tried to like it many times, and LinkedIn is often seen as the place to do business networking. Twitter has secured me multiple 20K projects. Twitter is the place to network if you use it right. There's a lot of people on there now that say, build friends, not followers. And it really feels like that. You follow the right kind of people, you build a network of people who are saying cool stuff, and you've got friends for life. That's really special as well. The networking side, probably to some extent, even more powerful than putting out a daily portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think even we started with this, so it's kind of full circle. The fact that we came together from around the world, and I know you do it with a lot more people than I do through social media, but that to me is just so cool. And I've been thinking about this the whole time because it's kind of freaking me out a little bit. Our lives are so similar. it's and as I've learned more through this conversation, so I haven't spoken to all of it yet, and I might miss a couple things, but I just want to touch on it before I wrap up because it's blowing my mind, and I want it to publicly blow um, everybody's mind, or they won't care and they'll shut it off now. But we both have fitness kind of as a key part of our lives. I'm not as public as you are about it because I have a little bit of a self-conscious it's one of my most self-conscious areas that I'm working on overcoming. And I went the CrossFit route for a lot of my fitness. So when you're speaking about people who go a little bit too far into the fitness world, I know a lot of them,
Right.
and some of them are really good friends of mine. But the fitness piece, the wanting to be a cop piece, is another thing that I've always wanted to be a police officer. I recently just had a conversation with somebody about what it would take to actually get in and try some stuff. And I've never fired a gun because, like you, I live in a country where guns aren't really that big a deal. So we, we're not too concerned about somebody stealing our house from us. So we don't need the guns here either. But then my girlfriend has a younger sister who's almost the exact same age. You and I are almost the exact same age. And she just went through some very similar things, in a totally different field, more in the medical field of trying to find passion. And the medical field, I think, is a little bit messy because it's not like you're just a doctor. There's specializations. She looked at anesthesia. There's all these different things. And it was the same kind of conversation that her and I were doing, where it's like, what are you trying to do? Why aren't you just doing the things that you enjoy? Why aren't you just trying things and seeing what lands? And now she's going to be a science teacher. So it was kind of similar in that front. Also very loving parents. And I think I try really hard, though I think that um, you have more experience in it than I do, to be pretty open with my thoughts, and especially on social media. I'm trying to mess around with that a little bit more. And so as you talk, I'm literally just continuing to try to think of ways that we can work together. I'm gonna have to come there when I can come there,
Yeah.
um, for multiple reasons. But I even just the idea, and I'm just gonna say this publicly because it then holds me accountable, that you and I have had early discussions on starting a book together, because I think that it would be really fun to have some of that chemistry that we bring to the table a little bit together, and some of the ideas that you have visually, and the things that we see through on obvious and that kind of thing, combined with some of my ramblings that might have some impact on some teens and how they approach all the things we talked about today, like failure and making mistakes and curiosity and being human, and not being too shy about just being you as a way to actually grow. So all of that is really just an expression of appreciation for the fact that you shared so openly, because now I realize that we may actually be related. Actually, other than the hair color, um, my dad was born there, so I'm maybe there is some kind of bloodline that is connected.
Well, I've got the most generic surname that's ever existed in the world because Burgess actually just means somebody who pays rent. So it's possible.
Well, I guess my surname King might mean that you're somebody down the line. I don't know if I have any royalty in the family, but maybe somebody down the Burgess line rented from somebody named King.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if I don't King also has been associated with some not so great characters, but I think it's got a pretty pretty positive group of people in general associated with that one. I think one of our first conversations was I asked you if you had any family here because I know two or three Burgesses and have worked with them, and right away you were like, "There's like 10 million Burgesses." So
Yeah, it's a common surname. People still don't know how to pronounce it. At
yeah.
least it's common in the UK. I think there's a famous cricketer or something who's Burgess as well. But let's not talk about cricket because it's shit.
What's your sport of choice then? Beside team sport of choice.
I used to play rugby for a little while when I was at school. I've always been I'm a really chilled out guy, but I've always loved violent sports. So I played rugby, but then I broke my foot in three places, so stopped. And then I started playing American football
Oh, nice.
in the UK, and I absolutely adored it. I'd love to still play now. It's just I don't like training. I I feel like I know the game inside out because I played it for so long. I played it from 15 years old right up until probably 25, 28 or something. Played for Great Britain, played for England. So I played it quite a lot. And after that, I've recently, well, the last 3 years, started doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the first
Mm.
solo sport I've ever done, which is very different, but very rewarding. And it means you've got to hold your ego at the door as well. It's a really good sport. Although I haven't been able to really do it for the last year and a bit now
Mm.
because of the whole pandemic thing.
Yeah. Have you seen the show Ted Lasso?
No.
So it was recommended to me by a friend and another guest on the show, Carly Clark, who's one of the Canadian national basketball coaches, and she coaches at a university in Toronto called Ryerson. And she recommended it to me. It's about an American football coach who gets hired to coach a European soccer football team.
Right.
And it's, I can't remember the main character's name. He's a well-known actor, and
I
I,
can
I
picture him.
you would appreciate it quite a bit. Like it's very a lot of dry humor, and a lot of fun poked at both North American and UK culture, which is pretty fun.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, totally. Do you have anything that you're consuming right now, book, video, audio wise, that you would recommend to the people listening?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've just finished, well, a couple of months ago, just finished Seth Godin's This Is Marketing.
Mm.
I would recommend that to anybody because we've all got to be marketing ourselves in some sense. And I really love his way of looking at marketing. It's not like the way you probably think when you hear the word marketing. So that's a fantastic book. And the other one that I've never read, which I'm surprised, is The Art of Living by, and
Mm.
I can't remember how to say his surname. His name Epictetus or something.
Yeah, I can spell it probably, though I'm not going to, but I can't pronounce it.
Spell Epictetus, and he is like one of the founders of Stoicism. I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
Stoicism. I've read a lot of Stoicism, but I've never read that book. And that is the shortest, punchiest version of Stoicism you can find because it's the small, basically Stoic handbook that he wrote in his lifetime. And it's short, punchy ideas on how to live a better life, basically. And I recommend anybody read it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the Stoicism concept we could probably talk about for a long time. Have you followed the Daily Stoic on any platform?
I've got the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the platform I like for this for the same reasons we've talked about in social media just pops up there, gives me some great tidbits, and the book was awesome as well.
Yeah.
Uh, I totally forgot what I was going to say, and because I don't edit stuff like this out, this is going to be a solid part of the podcast. But um, before I wrap up, oh, I remember what I was going to say. So on the Seth Godin front, I would highly recommend you his Alt MBA.
Yeah.
I don't have a business degree, which is something that I get. I have to talk about quite a bit as somebody who asks people for large sums of money to invest in my technology projects with our company. But I did do the Alt MBA, which is just a few months long. Seth Godin designed it. And it's the exact same thing you're talking about from his marketing book, where it's just a totally different pivot on what marketing is, but it's for the entire structure of business and building and creating and relating to people. And it's not cheap. I remember I used my PD budget for it at the college I was working at the time. So it didn't bother me that way. Otherwise I never would have been able to afford it, but it was so valuable. So if you ever get a chance to check that out, I think he does 3 or 4 cohorts a year through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about it. I know a lot of people who've taught on it or who've gone through it. I've always wanted to do it. It's the same thing for me. Costs a lot of money. I've got no doubt on the value of it. I've heard many positive stories, but it's also finding the time to focus on it as well.
Yeah, well, and that's I've been ever since. I think I'm 3 years from doing it now, and they talk to some people who do it about coaching in it and that kind of thing and teaching in it, and every time that conversation comes up, I'm like, I'm so interested in doing it, but it's with everything else that I have, you can't half-ass coaching in the Alt MBA. Like you have to be able to dedicate some attention to it, and it's just never been the right fit. But one day, maybe the same time that you find the time and the money to get in there, I'll find the time to and the money saved up to be able to dedicate that kind of length of my time to it.
You'll be my coach.
you don't want that. Maybe neither of us want that. we already do that for each other for free, it seems like. So
yeah.
Well, before I wrap up, we've now committed publicly. Well, I committed us publicly to writing a book together, and I actually have our first 3 chapters done, and I'm going to send them to you by the end of the day today.
Cool.
And I don't think it sucks.
Good start. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's not terrible. And if we can come up with some images that represent those first 3 chapters, we might really be able to jet. If people want to follow you, what are the obviously if they want to follow you on Twitter or Instagram, but if people want to follow your work in more detail, where can they go, and what are your handles on all the platforms?
Best place to go is just go to getdoingthings.com. It's got my Twitter handles on there, blog posts, YouTube channel, all that kind of thing. Go there and you'll find lots of things you don't want to read about. So that's the best place. Let's not confuse it with anything else.
That's such a better answer. I was on a podcast yesterday and they asked me that question. And I said, because of our blitz lately, it's like, well, you can go to any of these 4 accounts on Instagram, any of these 2 accounts on Twitter. You can look us up on LinkedIn, Facebook. We have 3 different websites. Boom, boom, boom. And after I got off, I realized if you actually just go to the one website, it does connect to all those things. And I guarantee you, we got 0 followers or interaction out of my answer. So
yeah, they'll edit that answer.
and it was getdoingthings.com.
.com. Yeah.
Okay. Always got to make sure that it's not .uk, .ca, .co.uk.
Well, we're not allowed .eu names anymore, so it's not that.
I'm not even going to touch that on that. Final question. If you had to give anybody a line or 2 on how to approach learning best, what would it be?
2 things. Have a project and work on it daily. 1 small thing every day on a project.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you very much, Craig. I appreciate the time. I blew it on the 30 to 40 minute front, but I kind of knew we would.
It's all good. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll talk soon.
See you later.
Bye-bye. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.